Welcome to the Graduate Writing Series online workshop, Exploring the Academic Writing Process, Part 1, sponsored by the Graduate Writing Center at Loyola. This is the first of 3 workshops in the Exploring the Academic Writing Process series. In this first workshop, we'll focus on raising awareness of expectations for graduate-level academic writing at Loyola. In that regard, we'll explore visualizations of the writing process and discuss the links between critical reading and academic writing. Furthermore, this workshop will offer practice exercises. At key points, you'll be encouraged to stop and try something, and to review your responses to the practice questions in an appointment with a graduate writing tutor. Links for making these appointments will be provided in the video. Parts 2 and 3 of this video workshop series will define typical genres of graduate-level academic writing and explore foundational strategies for reading and writing in these genres. This slide is one attempt to visualize the writing process so that we can appreciate the role critical reflection plays in longer writing assignments. We all learn about the writing process in elementary school. We're taught to pre-write, plan, compose, revise, and publish, as if one step led to the next like a series of dominoes falling. What they don't tell us in elementary school is that there is no one single writing process. Rather, we must learn to apply many different writing processes depending on our understanding of our audience, purpose, context, and the genre in which we're composing. In the context of graduate school, when writing for scholarly or critical audiences in complex genres, we must rethink our earlier definitions of writing as a linear chain of events. One result of this new understanding will hopefully be that you're better able to plan the time you allow for different writing-related tasks at the graduate level. Looking at this slide, you may notice that there is a timeline at the bottom that spans a hypothetical semester. The proposed writing assignment might be a term paper or a literature review that is meant to synthesize a good bit of your learning for the course. Notice on either end of the flowchart are the words text in and text out. That is because none of the writing that you do in graduate school is solipsistic. In other words, your graduate writing must locate itself in relationship to other texts or ideas in your field. That means nearly all writing has its origin in reading. Your professors have carefully chosen the reading list. They curate the most valuable texts for you. This may be one of the most important things professors do, because the reading list connects you to all the major ideas in that subject area that are considered relevant today. Early in the term, you read, analyze, and interpret those texts. You probably do small writing assignments to aid with comprehension, and hopefully you're taking notes in class. You're producing a lot of work here that might be called pre-writing. Now, after you read one text and analyze and interpret it, the chart sends you back to the beginning, where the professor assigns another text for you to read, analyze, and interpret. Before long, the professor is going to ask you to start making connections between the different readings. In order to make connections, you must pause and reflect. This little sub-process may happen several times. Further, it might require you to go back and reread some of the prior texts to look for evidence of the connections and the relationships you suspect between these readings. This reflective sub-process should also generate more writing that starts to connect the major ideas of the course with their sources in the readings. Documenting the texts in which these ideas originate will be very helpful later on. By mid-term, you probably have to start strategizing your response to the major assignment, whether it's a paper or a lit review. At this point, you must consider how your own ideas and reactions fit in with the ideas found across the text, which occasions more writing, rereading, and even rewriting, which some people may refer to as a first draft. Your goal in a long paper is to communicate meaning usually in several forms. You must explain the social significance of your ideas, that is, why they matter to society at large, the professional significance, why people in your field should care, and lastly, you might also explain what the significance is to you, why you care. So as you can see in this visualization, of a graduate writing process, there's still a sense of a linear process, but there's also a fluid relationship between the steps, many of which must be repeated several times. There's also a demand for more proactive writing, as in notes and drafts, which means you have to plan and manage those organizational mini-writings without being told to do so by someone else. As we move through this presentation, we'll talk more about time management, but for now, let's move on to the next slide. The next slide is an attempt to visualize the writing process both linearly and vertically like a musical score. To follow the analogy of a score, the instruments in the score are the thought processes behind advanced writing: comprehension, analysis, interpretation, and communication. They are all represented in the previous slide, but this slide attempts to show how each of these processes is independently recursive as opposed to linear, and how all these processes are linked in one larger recursive effort. Of course, you can see I had a little fun making this slide, and I don't claim that it's a scientifically accurate representation of the brain. It's just my humble attempt to show you that in reality, we all do a lot of the mental tasks of writing fairly simultaneously. To me, this means one thing: you simply can't rush it. Your brain is firing on all cylinders with multiple processes of comprehension, analysis, interpretation, and communication all going at once. Allowing time and space, usually quiet, undistracted space, is a must. What I want you to appreciate here is that writing is complicated, and it deserves ample time and respect. Look at the kinds of activities that go into simply comprehending a text: reading, close examination, note-taking, discussion, questioning, and rereading. Comprehension begins and ends with reading. Because at the graduate level, your understanding of what is important can change with each reading, especially as you learn more about the values of the course, your field, and as your own purpose for reading becomes clearer. We don't need to belabor every box in this chart. I just want to point out all the work you're doing when you try and write a graduate paper. With this kind of complex mental task, I hope it goes without saying that you'll be hard-pressed to succeed if you try to do all this in one sitting or even one weekend. Success in graduate-level writing means developing the time management skills to maximize all the little day-to-day efforts of reading and writing, and to bring those to bear on your longer end-of-term assignments. It's critical to understand the importance of reading and note-taking and time management. So let's review. I've been trying to convince you that the graduate writing process is one of discovery, which emphasizes its reflective and recursive nature. As graduate-level writers, we understand that usually we have to put something in to get something out. In other words, reading comes before writing. We understand that we must be patient and not try to skip or compress steps. Respecting the day-to-day processes enables us to trust our larger process, and trusting our own big-picture sense of process then is what enables us to manage our time accordingly. So here's what I'm trying to convince you of in this workshop. All graduate writing derives from critical, close reading of a text. If you accept that, then it must follow that effective writing depends on effective reading and strategic rereading. Effective reading requires consistent time management and careful pre-assessment of texts as a vital skill for effective time management. With that then, let me suggest, if you'd like a break, that this might be a natural place to hit pause. Up until now, I've been using the word text without really defining it. When most people hear this word, they imagine a textbook. In graduate school, however, depending on your degree track, just about anything could count as a text in your professor's eyes. Anything that can be analyzed and interpreted could also be called a text. So bear in mind when I talk about reading from here on out, I mean the sorts of things that count as texts in your chosen field. If you're in speech-language sciences, a text might be the transcript of a session with a client. If you're in film studies, a text obviously might be a film. As a grad student, your purpose for writing is often to provide evidence of your own careful and critical reading of some assigned texts. To demonstrate those qualities, your professors often expect you to engage in two different kinds of reading strategies. That is to say, they want you to read and write both with and against the grain of a text. To read with the grain of a text means to represent its ideas fairly and accurately. To read against the grain of a text means to raise questions and push back, to resist or consider the author's ideas in light of other points of view. In the next couple of slides, we'll unpack these concepts a bit and offer the chance for you to try it on your own. Reading with a text usually comes first, because it evidences comprehension. If you can show readers you understand the text, you are more likely to earn their trust for the moments when you ask them to question it with you. Simply put, reading with the text means doing your best to see and explain an author's point of view. This kind of writing should recall the subject matter as the author sees it. Here you work to add support to the author's thesis with your own examples. You also demonstrate deep comprehension when you can apply the author's argument in new ways or in new situations. A good rule of thumb is to imagine you have to explain the work to someone else. Reading with the text often occurs when writing summaries in which you need to be objective and identify main ideas, writing analyses in which you need to find the main points for elaboration and discussion, synthesizing ideas from similar sources, and inhabiting the author's viewpoint deepens your own understanding of an issue. On this slide, I'm going to start an extended example of reading with the text, based on my understanding of Michael Pollan's now famous 2008 essay, Why Bother? The first step in reading with the text is contextualizing the source using in-text citation skills and summary. The next few slides will pull together a summary that is intended to represent my understanding of Pollan's main idea. Your summaries may be longer depending on the course or the assignment requirements, or the length of the text, or the complexity of the ideas at stake. In this summary, I am trying to show I understand the article, and I'm trying to build a basis for later discussion. Where possible, I've let Michael Pollan's own words into my sentence structure to show that my understanding is based on textual evidence. So here goes, step 1. In his essay, Why Bother?, Michael Pollan, 2008, questions the social consequences of our approach to division of labor. He argues that we are, quote, specialists ourselves, and as a result, we can no longer imagine anyone but an expert solving our problems. After introducing the origin of the ideas you plan to explore, consider elaborating on key terms or providing field-specific definitions. This draws your reader's attention to specific language choices in the text that reflect the most important aspect of what is being said and or how it is being said. Once you've done that, you're prepared to explain how these specific words or phrases illustrate or relate to the core of the source's ideas and argument, and subsequently to interpret the significance of your key quote to Pollan's overall objective. So step 2 of my reading with the grain is as follows. The key word for Pollan is specialization. This idea is central to his argument about climate change and our environment because he believes that as a society, Americans tend to avoid personal responsibility for acting by making action someone else's problem, the specialist. The last step in reading with the text is to try to extend the ideas of the author into a similar but different context in order to expand your reader's comprehension. This also sets the stage for your later exploration of the limits of these ideas. So the third and final step of reading with the grain sounds like this. When I think about Pollan's point, I have to admit I often think about climate change as the responsibility of others. I feel hopelessly small. After all, if I'm sick, I go to the doctor. If I'm in legal trouble, I go to a lawyer. It seems natural to me, then, if the climate is sick, that we look to a climate doctor or an expert for solutions. Yet in his essay, Pollan is trying to convince us that if we take the same small actions, it will add up to a big action. Specifically, he wants us all to take responsibility for growing some of our own food. So far, we've been doing everything we can to understand, explain, and apply Pollan's thinking fairly and accurately. In this process, we are building up our readers' knowledge and earning their trust for the critical thinking that lies ahead. Here's the full text of my efforts to read with the grain. In his essay, Why Bother?, Michael Pollan, 2008, questions the social consequences of our approach to division of labor. He argues that we are specialists ourselves, and as a result, we can no longer imagine anyone but an expert solving our problems. The key word for Pollan is specialization. This idea is central to his argument about climate change and our environment because he believes that as a society, Americans tend to avoid personal responsibility for acting by making action someone else's problem, the specialist. When I think about Pollan's point, I have to admit I often think about climate change as the responsibility of others. I feel hopelessly small. After all, if I'm sick, I go to a doctor. If I'm in legal trouble, I go to a lawyer. It seems natural to me then that if the climate is sick, that we look to a climate doctor or an expert for the solution. In his essay, Pollan is trying to convince us that if we each take some small action, it will add up to a big action. Specifically, he wants us all to take responsibility for growing some of our own food. Reading against a text is challenging. To do so, you have to try your wits against respected and published authors and thinkers. The temptation will be to agree with everything they say because they're very persuasive. But the way you improve your own thinking abilities is to try to find the limits of their ideas, to find ways to reasonably question their assumptions. It takes practice, but when you do it well, it shows your readers that you are in control of your own thought process and that you are not just being buffeted from one author to another. Here are some strategies to practice when learning to read against the text. Point out what the author has omitted or overlooked. Try to find what has not been said or speak for voices that have been misrepresented or underrepresented. Identify assumptions, ideas, or claims that seem to lack a basis for evidence, and of course, try to rebut the author's ideas with counter-reasoning and counter-examples. Reading against the text is most useful when you're writing a strong response, writing an analysis that shows the limitations of a certain point of view, writing a synthesis that shows which ideas go beyond, reject, or replace others, and writing your own arguments that qualify, refute, or counter claims made by other authors. So, if someone told you climate change was your problem, what points would you raise to counter their thinking? Everyone else's reaction is likely to be a bit different, but here's my response. Pollan's ideas about individual action and personal responsibility might carry some weight when it comes to making oneself feel less guilty. Planting a backyard vegetable garden can't possibly provide for my family's needs, however. Furthermore, it seems that climate change is an urgent problem that needs concerted global action, not scattered, indiscriminate local responses. Isn't the reason for representative government to tackle these kinds of public problems? On one hand, I feel like I want to do something, but I can't help but feel like we do need experts to solve global warming with technology like green cars. Reading with and against the grain are skills that must be consistently practiced. Once you begin to develop these habits, they will help immeasurably on longer writing assignments. You may recall our first few slides posed the problem of a term paper and alluded to various forms of pre-writing. At the end of this talk, you'll have a chance to practice reading with and against the grain. For now, we're going to shift gears and talk about several other advanced reading strategies. These strategies are about taking effective and useful notes. By useful, I mean not only that they'll reinforce your learning, but that the notes will also be a form of pre-writing for longer assignments. Imagine how nice it would be to begin an outline for a term paper with 20 pages of well-written notes already done. Your ideas will never be fresher or clearer in your mind than the moments after you finish reading an article or text. So I strongly recommend that you allow an extra 15 minutes after you finish reading to take some written notes, using complete sentences, writing both with and against the grain. This not only prepares you for the advanced writing challenges ahead, but more immediately, it prepares you to contribute in the class conversation. Following this method ensures you'll also be able to have all your questions answered by the class or the professor. Here are some tips to help you do that. Read for a purpose. Understanding how a given text relates to a specific course concept or writing challenge will help you read for that purpose. Is the text before you intended as background, historical context, explication of a key thesis, a formerly held but now questioned idea, etc.? Figure out which texts are most important and plan to read those materials twice. Make written notes while rereading. Record both with and against the grain responses. Don't rely on highlighting passages. Highlighting is passive reading. Don't rely on memory. There's just too much to remember. Write a strong response to the ideas in each text. Strong response requires a deep engagement with the text. Strong responses critique the ideas presented and include personal reflection to make those ideas relevant in your context, and if appropriate, analysis of the writer's rhetorical situation. Keeping notes like this will help you organize and stay focused throughout the grind of a long semester. The best readers find and identify the key moments in a text. Key moments are quotes or passages that spark strong responses because they trigger associations with other course materials or personal reactions. Key moments are the ones that strike you as thought-provoking. They raise questions or present problems. Key moments can also be parts of the text that seem confusing yet suggestive. Use these key moments as the basis for your written response to the text. Even if response writing is not assigned, it's a great habit to acquire. Writing reinforces your ideas in memory and helps you clarify your thoughts. Pre-writing makes it easier to speak in class and easier to begin a longer writing project. One last point before we wrap up. That is, good readers always consider the source. You should make an effort to understand the social and historical context that surrounds every text you read. Articulate the differences between yourself and the writer's intended or contemporary audience. Use these differences to identify and question the underlying assumptions, values, and beliefs in the text. Your gender, age, class, ethnicity, sexual orientation, political and religious beliefs could all become the basis for an affinity or estrangement from a given text. Understanding and expressing your relationship to the text is the basis of ethical research. On this slide, I've included a link to an article by economist John Kolmos about the national efforts to raise the minimum wage. You're encouraged to practice producing a written response to this article that showcases your ability to read with and against the grain. Once you've done this, you can bring your writing to the Writing Center and review it with a graduate tutor to get in-person feedback on your writing. To make that easy, I've also included a link to the Writing Center homepage where you can get information about how to make appointments with our staff. And don't forget, the Loyola Graduate Writing Center is always available to help with any writing assignment for any class. I hope to see you in the Writing Center soon.